need a high-end designer or a lot of money to get a luxe look. Be your own interior designer.
This is Affordable Interior Design, the podcast.
Here's your host, Betsy Helmuth.
So my first question today comes from Hannah. Hannah's writing all the way from Clifton Springs, New York. It's not too far. She writes, "Hey Betsy, I need help with wall decor in my living room. As you can see, my gray sofa on the back wall is off-centered with a chair on the right. Where do I place my artwork on the wall? I want to do a large photo gallery. Do I center it over the sofa? The sofa is pulled off the wall by about 20 inches. I don't want things to seem off center. I plan to hang a gold mirror over the beige sofa. You can see the mirror leaning against the wall next to the TV at the moment. I know the TV stand is too narrow, but it's not a priority to spend money on that at this time. I don't have an inspiration piece for this room. I'm thinking of getting tie-up curtains to hang over the window in a colorful pattern that would serve as an inspiration piece. What are your thoughts? I would never use them as I have the pull-down shades, so I wouldn't have the hassle of untying and retying. I'd love to hear any thoughts that you have." Okay, well, Hannah, let's get into it. So, guys, if you're wanting to visualize what Hannah is describing, all you have to do is go to our YouTube. And then you can see everything in Affordable Interior Design on YouTube, so you can get a real sense of the space and what she's referring to. Just to give you a sense, if you're listening, say you're doing the dishes or driving your car like I do when I'm listening to podcasts, I'll give you a sense of what I'm seeing here. So yes, there are some very large, well, there's a very large gray sofa with a matching recliner. And by large, it's not large in length, but it's very commanding in terms of it's bulky. And I have a feeling it's a reclining sofa, which may be why it's 20 inches off the wall, unsure. And then on the perpendicular wall, there's an opening to another room and a beige sofa that's tufted. And then as we make our way around the room, there's a larger opening on the next wall to the dining area. And that's where the TV is, with that narrow TV stand and the mirror next to it. And then our last wall is pretty much taken up with these amazing panoramic windows that have a long window seat with storage underneath. So let's get to these questions. The first question is, where do you place your artwork? Well, here's the thing. I don't love the room's layout. The room is very long. And let me just guesstimate here. I love to guesstimate. Even when I'm working with my clients, I love to just guesstimate before I measure. I don't know. This is just how I get my kicks. But I would say I'd say this room is like 21 feet long by 14 feet wide. That's what I'm going to say. 21 by 14. So it's quite deep. And right now, all the furniture is hugging the perimeter of the wall of the room. So everything's kind of pushed against these walls, even though the one sofa is 20 inches away, and there's a huge void left in the middle. It just looks conspicuously empty. It's bothering me that we have a matching sofa and recliner, and then this other sofa that's a totally different style, a totally different profile with its tufting, its legs, whereas the gray ones are chunky and contemporary. The one that's beige is more transitional. And then I know that you're wanting to do drapes with tie backs, but this window is kind of inset, and underneath is that seating, as I was mentioning, that window seat, which means that the drapes are either going to be outside the window box completely, kind of on the walls that surround the window, which is going to look a little odd, or they're going to be inset. And that means that they're going to eat up some of this beautiful panoramic window, especially if they're tiebacks, which is going to eat up even more of your window unless they're somewhat sheer, but even then. And then they're going to be resting on this window seat, which I think is very weird. Additionally, when you rest on a window seat, typically you do the corners, right? Because then you have some back support. And the corners are where this fabric is going to pool. And my problem with that is then you're resting on fabric. Now, already, let me just get on my window box high horse. Nobody besides your cat really sits in a window box if there's comfortable furniture in the room, right? If it's an office space and there's no other comfortable seating like an armchair or a small love seat, then people might sit in a window seat to like be on their laptop for a moment. But in this living room that has very comfortable sofas, why would anybody sit in a window seat where the only back is the partial wall, where you're kind of resting your body against the glass window? For me, they're just not always practical. They're not always actually used for what they're for. And the pets love them. But, my clients who are always clamoring for ones aren't thinking practically about how they'll use it day to day, and they wind up not using it. Why am I going there? Well, it's really just more of a decorative aspirational piece. And so maybe that would influence where you put the pillows, but I don't feel confident about drapes here at all. Okay, now let's get to your question. Sorry, I just have to really go there about artwork. Well, the reason that I'm talking about all these other details, why I'm talking about the drapes, why I'm talking about the furniture, is because I do everything else before I do artwork. Now, maybe I've already selected artwork if it's my inspiration piece or something like that. But I really have a plan for not only the room's layout, but also the room's intention before I even think about art. And here, this room has a lot of zones which feel unintentional. So I would be asking myself, why do I have these two mismatched sofas in this space? What do I want to use as the primary piece of seating? And if it's going to be the gray sofa that's opposite the TV, first of all, do I have the TV in the correct spot? Question mark, question mark, because we do have other options, and I like to try every option before I settle in. But also, then I think your couch is way too far from your TV. Now, you'll want to do the measurement that I talk about, which is you want to take the measurement of the TV. Well, anyway, here's what I'm trying to get at. You want to make sure that the sofa is the appropriate distance from the TV. And for me, this is way too far from the TV. So, what you would do is you would take the sofa. So basically, you take from where you sit on the sofa to the screen of the TV. You take that number in inches and divide it by 2, and that's how big your TV should be. And that is what is happening here. Is I think that your TV is just way too small for the distance of the space, or you need to start closing the space in. Now you say, Betsy, if I bring this gray sofa more than 20 inches off the back wall, if I bring it in 5 feet, as you're suggesting, what am I going to do behind there? Well, you already have some built-in shelving on the side, so we probably wouldn't want to do that. But is there another function that this room needs? Is there something else? Because right now, the huge void in the middle is making this space look really unintentional. And then the other issue that's compounding that is that it's carpeted. So we can't use an area rug to define a smaller zone. What I'm trying to get at here, Hannah, is you've put the cart before the horse. And the horse being, we really need to get a grasp on this furniture layout before we even worry about the gallery wall, the additional art. The other thing that you've kind of neglected that should be a primary focus when you're deciding the room is, first thing is I do the layout, create the floor plan, make sure it's solid, make sure all the furniture makes sense and that the room is functioning the way I want it to. Second, I will create the color palette, which means I will have the inspiration piece as an anchor. So not only have you not firmed up step 1, we have not firmed up step 2. Drapes are a very difficult thing to make the inspiration piece. The only reason that's difficult is not because it's not a good choice. Typically, they're long, typically, they're filling up a wall, typically, sometimes they will be closed. So that would be a very big visual element in the room. What I mean is that there's just not a lot of selection of drapes that have 3 Roy G. Biv colors or more and that you're going to love. So it can be a difficult inspiration piece to find. It's easier to find artwork or easier to find an area rug. In this case, we won't be doing an area rug because putting a rug on top of plush carpeting is not going to be the best idea. I would do that with a very low profile carpeting, like a commercial grade. But you could easily do this with a big piece of art, right? And if you're going to use a big piece of art, that means that that would dictate where your gallery wall goes, right? And then you mentioned this mirror. Now, this mirror is not very big. It's roughly the size of the TV, which is not very big. Let me see where you said you were going to put it. Over the beige sofa. I don't think it's big enough. Now, don't forget my formula. The width of the mirror should be 50 to 75% of the length of the sofa in order to go above it and look proportional. Now, my concern here is that the mirror is relatively small. And so it's really going to not only dwarf that wall, but look like it's a small floating piece above this elongated beige sofa. I think you have a lot of thinking to do here, Hannah, but you should not be thinking about gallery walls or mirrors until you've solved step 1 and step 2. So sorry to give you a little more homework, but guys, here's what I'm finding. When you don't plan in advance, when you don't design a room with that strong game plan, you're basically playing whack-a-mole. Not only whack-a-mole with what it's going to look like, but also how it's going to flow. And sometimes it can look like you made one decision after another, like dominoes, kind of reacting to something versus going in with a strong plan and a strong vision so that you're not just arbitrarily, oh, here's an issue, let me solve it. Here's an issue, let me solve it. And then everything sort of looks haphazard. That's what I'm going to say. I see that a lot. And I know it's hard to step back and make a game plan for the room, especially when you already have pieces that you've committed to. But it's even more essential when you have pieces you're reusing because already it might feel a little haphazard. So we definitely need to rein it in and get that strong vision. And so I don't want to answer questions. I don't want to answer step 3 until you've done 1 and 2. Hannah, do 1 and 2 and come back to me with the gallery wall mirror question. A big thank you to Aton and the Embassy who wrote our theme song. A shout out to Catherine Heller who owns the podcast shop and is our editor extraordinaire. We also want to thank Ginny Sunasan and her team at the Savvy Podcast Agency for their help with our social, our YouTube channel, and so much more. We also want to thank Uploft, which is our parent company who supports this podcast. And lastly, we owe a huge debt of gratitude to you. Thank you so much for tuning in and for all your support.